Hey everybody, welcome to the Honey and Absinthe review for Avatar: The Way of Water. We're your hosts. I'm Vincent, a background designer for the Hollywood animation industry.
And I'm Janet, the ex-Disney artist turned independent creator. And make sure to like, subscribe, jingle all our bells and buttons, and then let's get straight into it.
Erect that thumbs up button. We are going to talk about Avatar: The Way of Water, directed by James Cameron. Our first hopefully 10 minutes of this review is going to be dedicated to non-spoilers. And if you are familiar with our content, the rest of the minutes is a very Honey and Absinthe, off-the-rails kind of thought vomit about the movie.
Yes. First, let's start with just an overall summary, non-spoilery summary of what this movie is about.
So for anybody interested in this movie, in this world, Pandora, and these blue cat people, what do they have to expect for this movie?
Avatar: The Way of Water stars Jake Sully. Once again. He's the main character in the original Avatar, except now he lives on Pandora with a family. It's all sunshine and rainbows until the Colonel comes back to Pandora in search of revenge. To protect his family, Jake Sully takes his family to a far-off islander area of Pandora where they have to learn the way of the water in order to survive. They
basically meet the water Na'vi,
yes,
who have a completely different skill set from what we discover are the forest Na'vi, which is like Jake Sully's kind of normal blue version of the Na'vi. These are turquoise, very fishy, more than feline-looking avatars. If everyone's probably asking, is it an improvement from the original?
Yes.
And I think in every department, it is. This one has more fleshed out characters, a story that you can go along with. Mm-hmm. I really thought the first one didn't have much of a story at all. And actual charming characters that you get to experience the wonder of the water world with.
Yeah. I would say the visual effects, what the first Avatar is known for, is an improvement and pretty spectacular and amazing. If you're going into the movie expecting that, it delivers. The story is an improvement. We rewatched the original Avatar, and that story is not good. But this story is an improvement, slightly. And I would say the characters are an improvement as well. I particularly liked the new, young, fresh-faced actors who play Jake Sully's family and the other family of the water Na'vi.
What did we not like? We kind of teased that the story is slightly better, but what keeps it from like being a hard recommendation, especially in terms of that department?
Yeah, so where the movie kind of lacks still is kind of the story, in that it does sometimes feel like a repeat of the first movie. It's not a complete one-to-one, which is why I do think it is an improvement. But because it just feels like a repeat of the first movie sometimes, it does fall short in a lot of character arc moments and stuff like that. They don't feel convincing. Another dislike is that from what I felt about the first movie definitely felt like a mission in doing the craziest VFX mocap thing up to that point 10 years ago. This movie feels very much the same way, and for that reason the movie's a little bit bloated, because it's more to do with the visuals, it's more to do with the way water looks and the way people are interacting with mocap characters than it is really about just a good movie with a good story. So as a blockbuster, and I'm judging this as a blockbuster, that's where it lacks. It just feels like a very, very beautiful movie with a very simplistic story that isn't 100% fleshed out all the way. It's a 3-hour-long movie. If you like visuals, probably your cup of tea. If you're more like us and you want more story, it can get a little boring sometimes.
It reminded me of the comparison between Evil Dead 1 and 2. evil dad Sam Raimi was like, oh, what kind of hijinks I can pull off in the woods. But then with the second movie, it's like, I have more money, I have more time to spend with these characters, I have more budget. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can make. And like Avatar does the same thing of like it retreads the same thing from the first movie, but in a better way. Just makes me feel like we didn't tread any new ground here, other than a lot of water. A
lot of new VFX is the most new that we have improved upon in 10 years.
So Janet, if you were to give this a score, like a classroom assignment, what would you give it?
I'm a little bit more harsh on this movie. I'd give it a C. Honestly, a lot of movies in 2022 I would give a C or below. So that's it's not like I would give Top Gun like an A-. This I give a C. What would you give it?
I would give it a B-. I give it a B- because I really don't like the first movie a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where my expectations were on the ground.
Right.
But I did find myself losing myself to the movie a few times, truthfully. I found some of the subversive things they did with the villain and some of the discoveries in the water world exciting sometimes. But yes, when the movie over-romanticizes how beautiful it looks and what they're able to do, I go like, well, then that's great. But, in another 10 years, we're going to look back at this and be like, eh.
Right.
You know what I mean?
My problem, I'm a little bit harsh, maybe more harsh than the average viewer, probably because I'm not as enamored simply by visuals. It needs to be the whole package for me. So I give it a C.
It feels like the first movie.
Yes.
Not like the first, but it feels like if this were a 3-part trilogy, this feels like the first movie. The last movie was some strange test prologue kind of
proof of concept.
But if you've never seen Avatar before, this probably will be really enjoyable for you, I guess.
It's actually a great place to start.
Yeah.
If you've never seen the first Avatar, you probably don't need to.
Yeah. At this point.
Let's get into the spoiler review.
So everything after this is going to be spoilers and waxing poetic and all of that stuff. Okay, everybody. Welcome back to the Honey and Absinthe Show. We hope you're feeling great. You're looking great. Obviously, just absolutely very, very pretty. You're wearing more than the Navi right now because it is very cold. But you still look great. I still see your face. I see you. So what we're going to do is basically dictate the movie to you and like cathartically enjoy, reminisce, take a poop, whatever, on the parts that we love and the parts that we didn't like.
Yes.
So we're going to try to go beat for beat. And we just sat there this morning kind of plotting out the movie beat by beat, act by act. So that's what we're going to do with you right now. But before we do that, what were your expectations going into this movie, Jan?
After we rewatched Avatar, so that we can go into Avatar: Way of the Water with a proper knowledge of, it's been 10 years. Yeah. There were a lot of issues that if I were the director of Avatar, that I would want to address 10 years later in the new movie in terms of VFX. Because I always go into a movie trying to understand what the artist/director intention was. I wouldn't judge, for example, a blockbuster like I would judge an indie art house movie. Or I wouldn't judge a first-time director the same as James Cameron. So with Avatar, after rewatching the first movie, it felt very much like a VFX test. One long, giant VFX test. And knowing that, it makes sense for Avatar to have not much of a story and to focus solely on the mission, James Cameron's mission, of using mocap to the best of his ability. Honestly, looking back at Avatar, there were a lot of issues still back then. Like now we're like, it's been 10 years, we're used to it with so many Marvel movies that utilize this stuff with Planet of the Apes or whatever. But back then, a lot of the mocap interactions with humanoid characters or just human characters with the actors. So when there's like a live action character next to a Navi character, a lot of that didn't look good, especially when you're looking at it today.
Right. That was a very, very hard thing to do, to sell a real human being and this imaginary giant creature and to really make it look like they're interacting in the scene together. If you watch the first one, it's a flex that they were able to try to do it, but then there's something really off, uncanny valley. Doesn't really feel like the Navi live in camera the way the humans do because, of course, they're CG animated. So what we assumed was like, we knew this, like they have to, like you have, like that has to look outstanding in this movie. And like to James Cameron, I'm sure if he watches his movie again, he'll be like, that we need to make that really, really, really good.
Yeah. So I expected the mocap to be better in that respect. I also expected that, like, because we've been doing motion capture for 10 years now, that he has more time to give to the story. The story was just phenomenally bad in the first movie. As like I was like high school senior when the first Avatar came out. I wasn't a trained artist. I hadn't worked in Hollywood yet. I was mesmerized. We all were. Stuff like the recent Marvel stuff and all the VFX stuff we see now just wasn't really a thing back then. So back then it was already impressive. So I was dazzled by all that stuff, and I didn't know much about story. I didn't care really. So, but going back and rewatching it as an adult, ooh, it's bad. It's really bad.
Well, be precise. What makes it bad? For me, it's the for me, it's how two-dimensional the characters are. The Colonel is just an angry Colonel that you would expect, just wants to get the job done, doesn't matter how many innocent people are in the way. There's the corporate people who are like, we need to mine this special ore. There's nothing past these motivations, and there's no sense of that we should feel more empathy for these characters because it's so black and white what they want to do.
For me, it's bad because it's paint by numbers Pocahontas.
Well, yeah.
Except Pocahontas is actually a better movie because you buy the characters' motivations a lot better. In my opinion, there's no real reason for Neytiri's character, Zoe Saldana's character, to have fallen in love with Jake. Simply because he is the chosen one. He's the guy that has come to save us all because the jellyfish
chose him.
A lot of character motivations were not fleshed out, nor was it was a very simple, I guess, hero's journey-esque story that just felt really two-dimensional and flat.
And one of the worst things about the movie, just truly the worst things, is Jake Sully. He is not a fun protagonist to follow. I kept thinking throughout, like, watching the first movie all over again that, like, boy, like, Jake doesn't really care much that he's in Pandora. He doesn't really care much that he's looking at all of this crazy stuff. He's happy to have legs.
Right.
That's kind of the only thing. And, like, what I kept thinking was, like, it would have been nice if we had that, like, wonderment thing. But, like, he's too enamored with him being able to do the things that he can't do. And it doesn't make me feel like I should care about the world because my protagonist doesn't really care much about the world.
Right. So, like, it seemed like the VFX was on James Cameron's main goal for the first movie. The second thing was definitely the world of Pandora and the Na'vi. And like you said, the problem with, like, him wanting to build this world similar to the Lord of the Rings world, the Harry Potter world, the Star Wars world, and to get us to really buy into it and really want to live there, experience it, the wonder of it, was that the main character, Jake Sully, is really bad. You don't feel any amount of wonderment, and you're supposed to, like, in stories like Lord of the Rings, in stories like Harry Potter, Hogwarts and all that stuff, you care about the world not because the world is such a beautiful, fantastical world, but because you identify with Frodo or you identify with Harry Potter, and they get to experience the wonderment of the world, and through their wonderment, you also feel wonder and interest, and you start falling in love with this world. The problem is, Jake Sully does not feel wonder. He does not care. The scientists feel wonder. Jake Sully cares about his new body. He wants to walk. He wants to run. He's a handicapped person who wants legs again. And so somehow Pandora falls a little flat. It does not spark joy. It does not create the wonderment that you feel when you see Hogwarts for the first time. It doesn't create the wonderment that you see
when you're at Minas Tirith for the first time and everybody's gathering. Yeah.
Or like seeing elves for the first time or whatever. So like if that's a criticism we have about the first movie, I'm sure James Cameron was like, I love this world. How do I make other people love this world too? Even more in the second movie. So those are our expectations. These are the improvements that if we were the director of the first movie, we'd be like, those are the things I want to improve upon in my next movie. So
was he successful? How successful was he is everybody's question. Now we're going to go beat by beat. So Janet, how does Way of the Water start?
The best way I can describe it, I don't like how modern day movies have been doing this a lot. It starts with a prologue. It doesn't really start with an act one. It starts with a lot of updating you on what has happened up until this point in the time between the first movie and the second movie. So Star Wars does that. What do you call it?
The crawl.
The crawl, because of tradition. I don't actually like it, but it's tradition, so whatever. Where it like gives you a summary of everything that has happened in the time in between that you're not going to see. Except in Avatar: Way of the Water, they do a montage sequence of events to catch you up to, this is what Jake Sully has been up to for the past, 10 years, let's say.
But visually, it does the same exact thing as the crawl in any Star Wars.
Yes. So I don't know how long it is. I would say it's anywhere between 10 minutes to 30 minutes. It felt like a long time.
I'm pretty sure this prologue is about 7 to 8 minutes.
Okay.
It only feels long because it's exposition.
Yes. It's just a whole lot of exposition. So you learn that like Jake Sully lives on Pandora now. He has become basically chief of his Na'vi tribe. He has basically took Neytiri as his wife, and they have had children and adopted children. And this is where you learn about each and every child that is involved kind of in this story. He has 3 kids, and then there's a human named Spider who basically was abandoned because he couldn't go back to Earth in cryo sleep or whatever because he was a baby.
Wait a second. There's like five children they care for. There's Spider,
5, yes.
I think. Spider, the
Yes.
2 brothers, the adopted sister,
Yes.
who is what something Nati.
Okay, so there's
Natatanga.
where is it? There's
Nafu?
Natayam, which is the
Natayam.
oldest son.
Okay, Natayam.
Yes. Loak, the
Loak.
second son.
Right.
There's
Son.
Kiri, who is the adoptive Na'vi child that came from,
Sigourney Weaver's Avatar.
yes, they don't know how, Immaculate Conception, but she exists and they adopted her. And then there's their youngest, which is a girl named Took.
A little one, like
Yes.
Jack.
And then
Little.
and then there's Spider, which is a human boy that kind of was left behind when the humans left, and he lives with the scientists and the Na'vi that
With the Sullys, basically.
yeah.
Sully's and his clan.
Yes.
So
yes.
there's a big ol' exposition dump, and then kind of like a little bit of a slap in the face is when the Sky people arrive, and then the Na'vi, Jake Sully's people, are forced to move again. It's kind of a slap in the face because it's beat for beat when the Grand Tree dies in the first movie.
Yes, this The prologue is basically the first movie condensed into like 10 minutes, which is like that tells you a lot about the first movie. But so what after like this little prologue, the sky people come back to Earth, devastate the area, and they have to like kind of flee or just figure out what to do with the sky people coming back to Earth. Fast forward to about, it said like a year later, the Jake's Na'vi people have basically become environmental terrorists. He and his family basically mess up the plans of the big corporatist sky people who transport, I guess, goods on trains and ships and stuff like that.
Right, they disrupt the supply chain to slow down whatever evil, nefarious deeds the colonists are doing, right?
Exactly, yeah. So they're basically like fighting the sky people kind of guerrilla tactic style. And then the kids, Jake's kids, are basically trying to pretend to be like little soldiers, stumble upon the colonel in his new Na'vi body, and his crew, who are basically kind of like inspecting the site of where he passed away back in the first movie.
This version of the colonel is a little different, but at the end it doesn't really matter. But like it's a little different that like his consciousness was saved in a consciousness bank. This is all exposition we learned, where the new Na'vi colonel looks at himself through the vlog that they do, and we learn that like, oh, a lot of the Marines have their consciousness in this consciousness bank where they like can live again as Na'vi. So apparently the colonel and his crew are basically resurrected and inspecting basically where Jake Sully killed him.
Yes.
That little kind of small space science station that they had.
The kids discover them. They almost get kidnapped by the Colonel Na'vi people. They escape, but they do capture Spider, which we find out is the Colonel's son. So there's some weird daddy issues there. Because they don't get captured, they run back to Jake and Neytiri, and they basically decide that this colonel, is out for revenge. He's specifically targeting Jake Sully and his family. They have Spider that knows exactly where they live, so in order to protect the village and his family, he decides to flee to, I don't know, there's plenty of hidden places all over Pandora, he says, where he can hide and never be found by this colonel guy. They flee to this water world where they meet new water Na'vi that are built different than forest Na'vi, and they have to learn the way of the water and how to survive in this new Na'vi family, in order to, survive and stay hidden from the colonel who's like looking for them.
Yeah, it seems very obvious at this point as an audience member that, okay, if Jake and crew are to survive, they need to learn these special new skills so that they can have one up against the colonel and his crew of people. And so when we go here, when we go to the water world, the movie essentially finally starts.
Yeah, so my opinion
about everything from here to this point.
I would say the bulk of this is a prologue up until the terrorist attack, basically. I didn't need that.
Everything before the terrorist attack.
Yes, I didn't need any of the montage scenes. I didn't need all that exposition, because you learn who these characters are, and where Jake Sully and his family are in life throughout the movie. So if you had cut the entire prologue out, I wouldn't have minded. In the same way, I didn't like when Black Adam did it if you recently watched Black Adam, there's a huge montage scene right at the beginning before the movie even starts, and I don't care. This is all exposition that should be shown to me through the actions of the main characters in the movie, not like just information dump. Whether it is a montage at the beginning of your movie or a crawl, it's still an exposition dump that I don't need or like.
Right. I was feeling that, like, so the whole function of the prologue is to obviously catch us up on what has happened, but then like introduce us to the kids. And I was thinking about, because there's so many kids that they like kind of dump on you, and you go like, okay, so there's like two and there's one, that one's adopted and that one's human, and then you go like, how am I ever going to keep track of these kids? Thank goodness I have this prologue. Not really.
Yeah.
Because you actually get to know the kids through their beats throughout the story. So when that happens, you look at the prologue and you go, that's kind of, we don't need that. That's kind of unnecessary. Because you really do. I really get a sense of like each kid and what they're about.
Yes.
By the end of the movie, which were in the beginning, I was like, "This is a huge task, man. I don't know about these kids. Are you really gonna make me feel for all of them?"
So what I liked first about Act 1 was I did fall in love with the kids' characters. I absolutely dislike Sully. Neytiri's all right, I guess.
Neytiri's less of an interesting character in this movie. She's kind of like the tiger mom.
Yes. That's it, yeah. But the problem that was solved in this movie, that we wanted to be solved, is the wonderment. And like, make me fall in love with the world by having us identify with characters that are also in wonder of this world. I really, really like the kids. And kid actors are hit or miss a lot of the times, but for me, these kids were really good at acting. They really sold it for me. I bought every second of their acting, and I just enjoyed spending time with them. More
than even when we visit what Jake is doing. I almost kind of want to go like, oh, I just care about what the kids are up to. And like all the Jake and Zoe Saldana scenes just are kind of like parents being parents.
Yes. I also think the inciting incident for this movie is a lot more impactful because it's technically the climax of the last movie when the sky people come down to the planet, and the reveal of the Colonel being a Na'vi. It happens so much faster and is more believable in this movie compared to the last movie, which the inciting incident technically was Jake and Neytiri fall in love.
But we had a criticism, right, of like there are some beats from the first movie that are almost identical, almost shot for shot identical from the first movie. Yes.
So what I didn't like about Act 1 is that it's basically the first movie condensed. There are even exact similar shot choices and scene choices. You said you think it's probably on purpose to parallel the first movie. So like, even though I say like the Colonel is introduced a lot faster, and the conflict is more clear and believable, I didn't like the way the Colonel's Na'vi character was introduced because it was shot for shot exactly the same as the first movie when Jake goes into his Na'vi body. I was like, he opens his eyes, it's a POV shot, it is blurry, there are two doctors hovering over you and you can't really make it out, and then your eyes slowly adjust and focus, and then you can see that they're doctors, and then cut to reveal of your body and you're like freaking out, and you're so big next to these doctors, and everyone needs to restrain you. I was like, I don't need 10 minutes of this. I don't need this entire scene. I was saying, like, technically, it would have been fine to just introduce the Colonel coming back in a more mysterious way, and then all we truly needed was that scene where he talks to himself through vlog form and explains the exposition.
Yeah, an alternative could be like, if we started with the raid and don't see what happened to the Colonel, we can easily just cut to the kids discovering where the Colonel's at, and it could be very E.T., where like we don't know who these people are, and like all of a sudden they're like the Na'vi from the first movie, the Marine kind of Na'vi, and then you hear this very familiar voice, and then you slowly reveal that it's like, oh, it's the guy. And then you can have that scene of like doing the obvious thing for all the people in the back who didn't get it for watching the vlog and going, we have a database of our memory somewhere.
Right.
Like, it's just a little too over descriptive. And I was telling you that, like, okay, the irony is here, like, the Colonel's going through the same beats as Jake and basically making all the wrong choices. Not something we need, I think. Don't you think? Like, it's like, it's cool. I understand the point here, but like, the runtime is the biggest enemy in this movie. And like, anything we can do to shave that runtime, I really think could be like a really tight movie here.
Yeah. If you've never seen the first Avatar, that scene probably wouldn't bother you. But like, that scene combined with we need to escape because the humans are here and they're trying to track me down. It's literally the second act of the first movie. And I go, again? We really need to do that again? And then we really need to see Zoe Saldana cry scream again? And I was just like, oh my god, why? What was the entire point of us rewatching the first movie then? Or for that movie to have existed?
Truly, if you haven't seen the first movie, you should just see this movie.
Yeah, this is fine. It's both movie combined. Again, it beat, for me, the first act is the first movie in that Jake and family now have to relearn the way of the Na'vi, but the water Na'vi. So like, Jake in the first movie had to learn how to mount a bird. In this movie, Jake and family have to learn how to mount a dolphin.
But the function's exactly the same. We need to prove ourselves to these folk, you know.
So it's the same, like, you bond, you like, be very sensitive with the bond, and then they're not very sensitive with the bond because they don't know what they're doing, and they get thrown off the dolphin, and then people laugh at them at not being able to do the thing. Or just not knowing how to dive properly because they don't know how to hold their breath for that long. They don't swim
the
like
water
that.
people can hold their breath for a long, long time while the forest Na'vi could barely do it.
Yes. So whereas like in the first movie it was like Jake's learning how to like swing through the trees like Tarzan, and like he's not as good at it as Neytiri. Like, it was just like an entire hour of this, and I was just kind of like, I am literally just rewatching the first movie, but now with kids, so at least it's slightly more enjoyable. That's my feelings of Act 1. It's just a whole lot of annoying repeat stuff, very predictable stuff, especially when you've watched the first movie. And the only thing that makes it better is the water is beautiful and the kids are more charming.
Then watching Jake Sully experience the world.
Yes. As much as I like the children, it didn't need to take that much time to develop the characters of the children.
To briefly just go through it, what do you think the scenes were? Which scenes specifically did you think were going a little long in the tooth?
For one, I felt like one of the children bullying scenes could have been cut out, at least. There are a few. There's one where basically the water chief's son takes Loak, the second son of Sully, out past like the dangerous part of the reef, and he purposely brings him out so that he can basically have a really dangerous encounter with some dangerous fish creature things.
This is like a hazing thing.
Yes. Another instance of bullying was they bully Kiri for being weird, for just staring at the sand. And the brothers get mad at the chief's son, and they start a fight, and then it just looks bad because they're here as guests and they're like beating up the chief's son, so they have to apologize and they're just being mean. The first one, the one where they're bullying Kiri could have just been axed completely. There's duplicate scenes like that I just felt like, I get it, okay? Kiri is a freak. She is a strange one. She's like all of us artists. We're just kind of strange. We stick our face in the water and stare at sand.
She's like the Luna Lovegood,
yes.
Like the spacey character.
I get it. We get it through a lot of other scenes. where it seems like she's particularly good at controlling aspects of nature.
But she's well aware that she's different. She has 5 fingers or something like that. Like she's kind of a hybrid human, and obviously the purebred Na'vi don't like that. And but like she's very self-conscious, and she knows that about herself.
Or that like Loak is the second son, and he has middle child syndrome, and also second brother syndrome of like, I want my dad's acceptance, but I'm kind of a mess up, and I don't have his respect, not like my big brother, that kind of stuff. You get a lot of that too throughout the story. So I just felt like there are a lot of scenes like that become duplicate scenes, and it makes the character development a little bloated. I start getting tired.
It overstays its welcome.
Yeah, you're not telling me anything new. You're just like trying to drive where these characters are in this point in time and where they need to be by the end of the movie. You're driving it home a little bit too much, where I'm like, okay, it's becoming a little like much, a little redundant. And on top of the bloatedness of some of the character development, I don't mind too much, because it does serve the story at the end of the day. What I do mind is the bloatedness of how long certain water scenes are. If you didn't know, James Cameron is really, really obsessed with water. He loves going in submarines and diving into the deep sea, and he loves water.
Michael Fassbender needs to race. Tom Cruise needs to fly. James Cameron needs to dive.
Yes. Ridley Scott needs to look at air.
Needs air. And atmosphere.
So, like, James Cameron's pet fascination is water. So knowing that, it explains why a lot of the VFX scenes where there's a lot of water involve splashing, reflections, bubbles. It's treated with a lot of care, almost too much care.
You'd think a guy like that would have a lot of notes for the art department of going like, water doesn't splash like that, at least in my eyes. It needs to be more like this or more like that. You're literally talking to the man who's going to be most particular about the way the water looks.
But the problem with that is, like, of course he's then going to have long drawn out scenes with the whales in this movie. So there's this character that Loak, the second son, because he's kind of like a black sheep misfit of the family, can't do anything right. He kind of, when he does get bullied and he meets this outcasted whale, it's not a whale, it's like a tulkun.
But it's a shorthand. It's a whale turtle,
yes.
Basically. A whale turtle. Whale. we'll call them whales.
Yes. And he doesn't really understand why it's outcasted. He befriends it. He really loves this outcasted whale thing.
They have an Iron Giant thing.
Yes,
together,
they have a whole Iron Giant moment. The problem is that the scenes with the whale take a lot of time.
A lot of time, man.
It's just, you just spend so much time in the water with the whale and romanticizing befriending a whale.
And then if you're clever, you're going to be like, oh, the whale is just going to save them at the end, right? Or the whale's just going to be one of those things that just helps them out in the end, right?
Yeah.
And usually in those scenes you see in movie, like, oh, like they befriend the dire wolf, or they befriend the dragon that's going to help them out. And like, we get it. But this bonding with the whale is a lot of whale.
It's drawn out. So if I could like explain it as like a storyboard artist, it's like he meets the whale, he tries to communicate with the whale saves him, he realizes how to communicate with the whale, and he
mind melds with the whale and sees his history.
Yes, he helps the whale because he has a little harpoon in his fin, and he helps him out by taking it out. And then, as a thank you gesture, he has this long drawn out sequence where he's swimming with the whale. And it's not simply he swims with the whale and then cut to no, it's like he swims by its side. It jumps into the air.
You think if this were a Disney movie, there would be like a musical number playing in the
background.
Except there's no musical number.
He's like holding on to the fin. He's like laying on its back. He's he lives a lifetime with this whale apparently, and I'm just like, there's so much whale, and I don't mind necessarily. Like, you do need to have some kind of bonding with the whale. I understand the point of the scene, but it's a little long and bloated. And I can't chalk it up to anything other than James Cameron has some fascination with water and whales for some reason. And I get bored. The problem is, it's so bloated, I get bored and I want to walk out of the theater.
Or close your eyes.
Yeah.
At the very least.
And there's nothing worse than a big blockbuster movie that bores you sometimes. They shouldn't be doing that.
I am straining my eyes for you watching this in 3D.
Yes.
It better be worth my time. There are some moments where, like, over-romanticizing, getting inside the pods and the really pushed perspective of the pods and how that looks like in 3D. And I'm like, that was cool for, like, the first couple minutes. Mm-hmm. But after 8 minutes of this, can we move on to them actually fighting?
Yes. You know? So now let's get into Act 2. Which the story really starts picking up because the Colonel basically, using Spider, he has some bonding moments with his not son, but like they kind of find the general area that the Sullys are hiding, and they basically arrive to the water country and start burning villages, very Vietnam style.
Yeah.
And as a threat, they concoct a plan. They're not speaking. They're very like loyal, trustworthy Na'vi. They're not outing the Sully family in hiding. And the Colonel concocts a plan with some whalers that they're going to kill a bunch of whales and bait the Sullys to come out of hiding.
These are literally whalers. There's no, like, they're not like sci-fi whalers. They don't have any like kind of like any difference between our version of 2022 whalers and Na'vi Pandora whalers.
Yes.
Like, their motivations are practically the same.
Yes.
They want to harvest apparently what is supposedly the most valuable thing in the galaxy, which is whale brain juice.
Yes.
But you remember from the first movie, there's an exact beat of them going, this mineral is the most important thing in the galaxy, in the universe.
And yeah, instead of what I assume was like in the first movie harvesting oil, in this movie now it's we're hurting the environment by like killing whales.
We're whaling, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they have a whole drawn out scene of how they do it.
They literally drill into the whale's brain from underneath the mouth.
And then suck out its brain juice.
Yeah, like the Starship Troopers.
Yes, and then go... And then there's even a whole, like, Spider goes, and this is all you take? You don't use the rest of the body? How wasteful. And I'm like, okay, I get it. You love
We
whales.
are awful. Whalers are awful.
Okay, so okay, let's keep going with this.
Sure.
Yeah. So
it's just a lot of whales.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jake Sully basically is like, no, that's what they want. The chieftain family basically get mad at Jake Sully. See, look, they came here. You said they wouldn't come here. And they're like, you need to leave. And he's like,
let me talk about the Colonel's original plan.
Okay.
Right. So basically, he wanted to kill all the whales to egg on the water people so that they draw Jake Sully out.
Yes.
Jake Sully is like, oh, no. This is their plan. But before that, they have this really drawn out scene with Kate Winslet. No, Kate Winslet,
yes.
Right? Kate Winslet's the princess Na'vi.
Yes.
And she's like mourning over this whale because like the Na'vi, the marine Na'vi have this special connection with the whales, and like they like feel their lifetimes together.
Yeah,
they feel their life together.
Spiritual connection with the whales.
Right, and she's devastated and more angry than ever that these awful colonizers have decimated the whales. Zoe Saldana feels empathy for the queen, and basically tells Jake, we can't just keep hiding, we gotta fight. But Jake, knowing the full wrath of the Colonel, is like, no, we need to be really careful about this.
Yes. So at first Jake is basically planning to escape again. But what they basically told the water people is like, go warn the whales. Tell them now they're a target for the evil colonizers, yeah, basically. So make them go into hiding. But the problem is there's this outcast whale that basically is outcast because it was violent at one point in time. You basically learn from the story that whales aren't allowed to be violent ever. They're never allowed to kill anything, and they believe that this particular whale once upon a time killed a bunch of Navi or whatever. So they outcasted him, but like because Loak has developed the special connection with this outcast whale, realizes that like, oh no, now the outcast whale is for sure going to get targeted because he's the only whale left there because all the other whales have left. So Loak and friends and children.
Well, Loak goes on his own on a personal mission, and the friends are like, "Hey, stop!
Right.
We're in danger.
Yeah, don't
this
do
is
that.
really dangerous."
Yeah.
And but like a big thing of the story is like the Sully family stays together. It's like a family stays together. So if this foo is going out on his own, we gotta try to fetch him.
Yes. So they discover the whale has this target thing attached to it, which means that the whalers are coming. They're coming any second now to kill this whale. So they try to get the little target thing off of its back. But in the process, the whalers do come, and it basically has baited the Sullys to come out. They capture the kids, and they use them as bait for Sully, basically. Mm-hmm. Once they've baited Sully's to coming out, they basically go Sully for the kids. So he kind of sort of agrees, but as the exchange is happening, the whale is really mad.
The exiled whale
is really mad because he was saved. He developed this bond with Loak. Loak was captured. He sees through the reflection in the surface of the water that Loak has a gun to his head. The whale gets really mad, and Deus Ex Machina comes out of the water like Free Willy, and
shot for shot like Free Willy. Okay, we really get to see that underbelly.
Yeah.
And then like almost as if the kid is pointing up like, "Go Free Willy!"
Yeah. And he like
spectacular though. It looks great. I mean, it looks wonderful.
And
majestic.
The whale basically has this extended scene of just messing up the boat and then like messing with the whalers and like the outcasted whale, the last time it got into a fight way back when, which is why it was outcasted, lost a fin, and with its revenge gets the whaler kind of like with the harpoon rope
wrapped around his arm, and he's caught on the gun.
The whaler gets caught, and then Free Willy gets his revenge, and the whaler goes flying, and his arm is cut off.
So an eye for an eye, get it? Hey. Storytelling.
In the midst of the chaos, the water people and Jake's family basically go to war, and they somehow free the captured kids, but the big brother and the little brother go, "We can't leave anyone behind. We need to go save Spider," who's kind of like in the cockpit of the, what do you call it? The main part of the ship, kind of hidden away, locked away.
He's really deep in there.
Yeah. So they go on a mission to save him. The other Sully children go, "No Sully left behind." So then they kind of also try to go and find them. The two brothers and Spider eventually escape, but one of the older brother gets shot and dies.
Right before I would say Act 3 happens, they have a grand old mourning of the son. Lots of Zoe Saldana screaming and being in complete distress that her eldest child has died.
Yes, but then they can't rest yet because somehow during the chaos, their 2 daughters were captured yet again, by the colonel.
End scene in Act 2.
Yeah, like the colonel basically goes, same deal. Children for Jake Sully.
So
Act 2.
What did you think about everything in Act 2 from here on out?
I thought Act 2 was a lot better than Act 1 because the story really starts to go. I think each act gets progressively better and better in terms of the VFX. I really, again, I adore the kids. I think they did a fantastic job. The battle with the whale was really crazy. I forgot for a second there that this was mocap. Mm-hmm. The water was really convincing. I have a motion sickness problem. It's pretty extreme. Some people have it not so extreme. They can handle certain movies and stuff. My motion sickness problem is pretty bad. I need to train myself and with exposure training myself with movies and video games helps, but like it's still bad. This I like visual effects when they don't make me dizzy. So this particular fight scene with the whales and all the Na'vi and the flying fish and all that stuff, it was amazing. It woke me up from boredom. It was great.
For me, it's like once the movie starts going and it's not introducing all the characters and the world and all that stuff, the Colonel's finally getting really, really close to the Sully family, practically burning everything in his wake. And then this big battle happens, and the things that I found impressive were those really cool kind of GoPro shots on the corner of like the boats, and as they bowie up and down, it feels so realistic, and you have that battleship in the distance. And it's like what really sells it is when you finally get to see some practical stuff mixed in with the CG stuff, it looks really cool. Yes. I think those scenes where we're inside those submarine pods and we can see sort of like X-Wing style the screen, the kind of windshield, and the windshield has to my eye, almost every single kind of warping and distortion that you would see through like a window that's being that's shaped that way. So like there's a scene where like you're in this cockpit, Star Wars X-Wing style, camera right kind of over your shoulder, and like the whale is in front of them. They're like poaching the whale, and then like there's this distortion of the screen of the windshield. There's the distortion of the water, and then there's the distortion of the whale in the distance, and it's just insane how perfect it looks.
Yes.
And that's like a flex. That's like really, really flexing that like we can do crazy shit with the camera, basically.
Right. But my main problem with Act 2, and like these aren't like huge problems, especially compared to the first movie, but like there are story problems that I have with it. In terms of like, I don't like how often the children get kidnapped and how that is used as the only device to create conflict and to move the story forward and give motivation to like Jake and Neytiri and kids. It's just they're just constantly kidnapped, which I just feel like by the third time I'm like, again?
Yeah, it's bound to happen, but it's like they almost got captured like way when the movie first started, so they get captured one or two more times throughout the story, and it feels a little contrived how they're captured. The first time kind of makes sense, like okay, they stumbled upon a pile of poop and then like they got caught, but then like they keep getting captured, and then like despite the chaos in the battle of the second act, there's still 2 kids that need to be rescued.
Yes.
And it's just like okay, well then let's rescue these kids. Yes. And enter Act 3.
My other problem, again, this movie has a bloated problem. It's just so much that could have been cut from this movie to not make it 3 hours long. So, like we mentioned, the whaling scenes, any scenes with water and whale are just so drawn out and long. Right before the whale jumps out of the water Free Willy style and saves everyone. The heartache of Jake having to give himself up. It dives down, I assume, out of frustration because it knows it's not really allowed to kill anyone or be violent at all. So it is upset that he has to kind of watch his new friend die, possibly. So it like has a little tantrum at the bottom of the ocean. It like destroys some rocks, some reefs and whatever. And I was just like, was that entirely necessary? And there's, I think, 2 or 3 times where the whale is being kind of epic towards the whalers. Like, the whalers shoot harpoons at the whale 2 times, and both times the whale has to do something completely like, wow, I didn't know whales could do that.
I didn't know things that could swim and that were that big could do that.
Yeah. I didn't know they were that intelligent. And it's like a whole action set piece set around the whale and this whaler that is not really important to the story whatsoever. And yet he's given so many bad one-liners and so much importance sometimes. It's just kind of annoying.
It becomes a very like Moby Dick thing.
Yeah.
And it totally totally takes a left turn and like this is whale versus whalers.
Yeah.
And then like the Sully thing, let's just put that aside for a second.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like a little Moby Dick movie in the middle of a movie.
Of a movie, right.
So let's go on to Act 3. Act 3 starts basically right after Nityam dies.
All hope is lost.
Mm-hmm.
All of our characters are boiling with revenge and sadness, and you're not sure, are they going to think clearly through this, or are they going to make mistakes? Is now all bets are off. Oh, could Jake die? I don't know. Could Zoe Saldana die? I don't know.
How are they going to get their daughters back?
Right.
Are they going to give up Jake? Which it seems like he's coming. He told the colonel, I'm coming. So what basically happens is Jake basically bombs the ship. Covertly bombs the ship, and then together he and Neytiri go into the belly of the ship as it's sinking to confront the colonel, who have their 2 daughters. They go on like a Mr. and Mrs. Smith style ninja thing where they like
assassinate everybody covertly, like it's Arkham Asylum or Far Cry.
Until it's just the colonel left.
They take out everyone with like ninja precision.
Yes. The colonel, last effort to like to stay alive, I guess.
To draw Jake's hand. Basically.
Yes, he takes Kiri, leaves Took. And so, like, they end up saving Took. And then it's revealed the colonel comes around the corner with a knife to Kiri's neck and is like, Jake, for your daughter. Spider and basically the entire family ends up being there because they follow Jake and their mother basically into danger. They always just follow them into danger.
And they never obey.
No, yeah. So, Spider basically goes, no, don't kill Kiri. She's my best friend. And then, Neytiri comes out from the shadows and, like, holds a knife to Spider's neck and goes, a son for a son.
Now, did this cross your mind that they could do this?
It crossed my mind, but I didn't
think they had the guts.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't think they would do it, but they did. So props to them.
Props, yeah. So, and like, was Zoe Saldana bluffing?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. She was ready to kill Spider for if any harm were to happen to her daughter, basically.
So she threatens the colonel. The colonel's like, that thing doesn't mean anything to me, and we're not even related. And then
it's like, ooh, ice cold.
Yeah,
Ouch.
you think. And then Neytiri basically is like, yells a final yell right before she's about to stab Spider, and then he's like, wait, okay, never mind. I do kind of love him. So here's your daughter. God damn it.
And then, so basically, it's just the Colonel, and then Jake and so the Sully family are kind of almost riding away into the sunset, and the Colonel's like, it doesn't matter where you go, it doesn't matter which planet, blah, blah, blah. I will find you, Jake Sully, and I will find your family. I'll kill them all. Basically.
Yes. So Jake realizes, like...
And he's right. He will go to the ends of the earth to kill Jake. So
yes.
Jake is like
a repeat of the first movie. I hoped you would say that. And then he, like, uses that as an excuse to, like, stay on the sinking ship and, like, basically fight to the death with the Colonel while his family escapes.
So, something very funny, special for all cinema fans, happens at this point. What does James Cameron do in the last act? In this last set piece, basically.
He recreates Titanic.
As a cinema fan, that was pretty fucking sick. That was like, I was there, like with my parents. Shouldn't have took me there, but like I watched Titanic. That's a very impactful movie for me. I hated the first 2 acts, but then when that ship started falling, I was like, "Whoa! You didn't tell me this was gonna happen in the movie." Yeah, boobies. Yeah, like DiCaprio. Yeah, Kate Winslet. Really cool, but like the chaos of the ship, and then like my favorite parts of Titanic were like over the shoulder shots of Rose and Jack, and like the turquoise water and the caustics floating up into the walls, and then like the lights like stuttering and like the creaking of the ship. Oh, it's so good. And that all comes back. Yes. All of that comes back, but in CG form.
Yes. In
the final act, and I'm just like, oh shit, I'm here for it. Let's go.
Yes. So I guess this is a good place to mention James Cameron. There's a lot of nods to a lot of other movies in this movie. Not all of it well done. You, in particular, liked the fact that he basically referenced himself with Titanic.
Yeah. A little self-indulgent, but yes. I'm like, if there's anybody to do this right, it's James Cameron, obviously. You know what I mean?
When the ship is like slowly turning over.
Oh my god, I'm just like, oh, I've been here before. Yeah. Totally been here before.
I was like, wow. But I don't like a lot of other places where he was doing it. For example, there's a scene, I think, in Act 1 where after they've captured Spider, they're interrogating him to try to get information of where Jake Sully is, and he refuses. But the way they're interrogating him is very Clockwork Orange. He's strapped to the chair with the thingy on his eyes, forcing his eyes open.
Almost exact close-up shot of him going, ah!
And on top of that, like, I didn't really like either. In the first movie, he also referenced 2001, except he was like, you know, I'm gonna do 2001, but on steroids, and have so many floating people, and so many, like, floating things, but this time, this is mocap. It's not practical. and then, like, the little satellite spaceship arriving to the planet of Pandora that looks like kind of like Earth, and it's very 2001. He kind of repeated it in this movie with less love and care, because we don't care. We've seen it once before. Like, you don't have to repeat it. But then he does that with Clockwork Orange, and then
the Free Willy.
The Free Willy.
I was just like, I think like when the whale saw the younger brother through the surface and is about to shoot up, I was like, no way. like no way this is gonna fly. And then I was thinking, well, Free Willy goes over the fence. What does he do? Like with it, once he shoots up. So like I know he's gonna do the Free Willy thing. So yes, lo and behold, we're on the ground with the ship, looking up at like the belly of the whale as dew from its body are falling on us. Okay, we did that. But the funny part is it falls on the ship and it kind of like flaps around and then it kills everyone.
Yes.
And it's so silly. But like it's like, yeah, okay, this is a contrived way of getting the whale to do the thing that he's not supposed to do because he wants to save his friend.
It's
okay, gotcha.
Just a funny nod that like shot for shot, very, very, very similar to other movies.
Then, like, just real quickly to zoom to the end, he does like the Darth Vader thing.
Yes.
Literally compositionally the same, with the colonel with his arm stretched out going, but my son,
Yes.
you're my son.
Yes.
Basically, join me and we will
then-
control the galaxy. Is like that fucking thing.
And instead of like whatever speech they say, he goes,
Yeah, instead of Luke going, no, it can't be possible. Like, he goes, and then goes away, and he,
Yes.
like, goes to his real family. So there's that. But, like, the one that's a little self-congratulatory, self-flagellatory, like, just a little, like, James. It was subtle enough, and it was fine enough for you kind of to bring back Titanic for this epic set piece at the end. But my God, did you have to have Spider and Kiri do the fucking Jack and Rose thing, going like, what does he say as they're falling, as everything is sinking again? Together, and then it's shot for shot that fucking thing with those two, and I'm just like, okay, I knew what you were doing. You didn't have to go like, I'm doing Titanic again.
I am the guy that made
I am
Titanic.
the guy who did
I
Titanic.
can do this.
I can do this. A little like, oh come on, like. So yeah, that was when the self-referentiation became a little cringe.
Yes.
But then it's almost like, of course he had to do it. I mean, I guess like he is
Right.
that guy. So whatever.
So as the ship is sinking, it happens exactly like Titanic. Jake incapacitates the colonel, basically puts him in a chokehold, and then you assume he drowns. But then Jake, not knowing his way out from kind of under the ship, now that it's sinking, he also almost drowns. What's his name? Spider and Loak go back down together to save their fathers.
But they don't know. Spider at least doesn't know that. They get separated, and Loak finds his dad.
Yes.
But then Spider thinks he found Jake, but it was actually his dad.
Yes. So Loak is kind of trapped and helping his dad try to like come breathe again. They find a little pocket of air somewhere, and they're like gathering their breath. Spider grabs his dad. He doesn't actually want to at first. He wants to just leave him and go find Jake. But his
conscience gets the best of him.
His guilty
it seems.
conscience takes his not dad back to the surface and saves him. Meanwhile, Zoe Saldana and Took have gotten trapped Titanic style in the interior of the ship because
Also unaware of how to escape.
yes.
Right. But Kiri, who is in the surface for a while,
Yeah.
uses her... Okay, so Kiri... We didn't talk about Kiri too much,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
So Kiri is kind of the Jesus.
Yes.
Right? It's kind of like on the nose. She's immaculately concepted, and she is simply different from everyone, and she has magical Navi powers.
Yes. Instead of God being a man and he, God is Mother Earth and a she.
Gotcha.
And Jesus is not a he, it is Kiri, a girl.
Girl. Right. Okay, so and then this sets up Kiri using her magic powers to, again, Deus Ex Machina the Zoe Saldana and Took out of trouble.
Yes, she like controls the little luminescent fish and helps discover all the exit pathways. So she follows the fish, finds Neytiri and Took, helps them breathe in underwater using the special fish thing, and then she leads them to safety. Meanwhile, Loak basically helps his dad to safety. His dad not being very good at swimming because he didn't learn the way of the water.
Completely.
Yeah.
Not as much as his sons.
Like while his kids were basically learning how to dive properly, I don't know what he was doing. But like his son is like, let me teach you really quickly how to dive so you can escape, you're not going to drown.
Basically recites the same words that was taught to him to breathe well underwater.
Yes.
So they go through this like thing, and like the water is rising, and like and like they go and draw their last breath, and then
Yes.
and then they themselves go out, and then with the help of the whale get shuttled up into the surface.
Yes.
And then Jake Sully, being appreciative and seeing how much of a man his son has become, finally puts his hand over his shoulder and goes, I see you. So those characters kind of have some character arc and closure.
Yes.
Whereas on on the other side, you see Kiri has saved the day, basically.
Yes.
A little bit more flat character-wise, right?
Yes. So by the end, which I guess I would call the epilogue, family basically has a Viking send-off for the oldest son. And then basically Spider's father is back to Earth, I guess, or planning his next revenge.
It seems as though one of the setups that they could have is that, like, the Colonel's still alive. The Colonel has complicated feelings about everything because of his son and everything. But it seems as though he's going to probably come back to base, probably bring in all hell to get Jake Sully in the future. Maybe. I don't know.
Yes.
But, like, it's set up that, like, that could happen.
And then Jake is basically very apologetic to the water people, and he's like, I will leave. Again, I will flee. You people also should probably flee. And then they're like, no, you are one of us now. You've learned the way of the water. You don't need to flee. So Jake learns by the end of the movie, he cannot flee. He needs to confront his problems head on, which is literally the exact same message you learned from the first movie, and which I don't understand why he needed to learn this message yet again in the second movie. Which is why I think this movie is technically Avatar 1. It's more fleshed out.
So yes, what did you think about Act 3? What were the things that you liked? What were the things you disliked, Chan?
So like you said, I even though it's a little self-indulgent, I do like the more Titanic set pieces because of the drama and how well done it is. It's James Cameron doing Titanic, and of course it's going to be well done. I don't like the more like tongue-in-cheek ones, like, oh, together. It's the strongest act of the movie. I was not bored. It's very tight story-wise. I don't really have any critiques of the story by Act 3. It's one, like, there are a lot of movies where either Act 1 is bad and the rest of the movie is bad. Either Act 1 and 2 are really good, but it doesn't know how to end. Or Act 1 and 2 are really boring and Act 3 is really good.
Rogue One.
Yes. Act 3 in this movie is very, very good. It's the highlight of the movie. It's what you should probably go to see this movie for. The effects are absolutely amazing in this act. I went in expecting the water to look great, so I was not surprised that it did. But I was surprised that the water and the fire together look so good. There's actually a lot of fire effects that I'm like, how did you do that? That's insane. I also liked, this is like a personal criticism that I have for Avatar 1. I noticed that I felt like James Cameron was trying to heighten the realism of mocap. Prior to Avatar, motion capture didn't look great. It looked very video gamey, or it just was obvious that something was CG. He was trying to capture realism, and in his mind, realism meant also documentarian style lighting. So let's say you went to Vietnam with the documentary camera, like a basic camera.
Or you went to find this almost extinct species in Africa.
Yes,
a camera crew and a camera.
Yeah, very Discovery Channel. Very like, there's very little, if any, color correction. It's very true to life, normal, almost like YouTuber vloggy. There's not too much done to the colors. The problem I have with that idea of realism is filmmaking realism is different from realism like a document how do you say it?
Documentary.
There you go. Just because a documentary feels real you shouldn't think of films the same way. Things feel real when you feel them. Feel is like the main thing here. So the way filmmakers make movies feel real is that they know how to push and pull at your heartstrings using different things like lighting techniques and acting story choices and stuff like that. There are not a lot of things that feel real in movies would never happen in real life, but it feels real, which is why I like when filmmakers take creative license with lighting in particular, because if a scene, for example, nighttime scenes are just black. They're not blue, actually, but like cinematographers and TPs have long drawn out arguments about how to light nights.
If you imagine, like, let's say you're meeting a bunch of indigenous people and it's a nighttime shot, they're gathered around the campfire and you're watching this on Discovery, you would imagine the sky is black,
yes,
the people are barely lit, and the fire isn't actually that bright.
Yes.
And what you're saying is basically is like that is the very true to life, unsexy,
yes,
not telling a story, just kind of capturing life for what it is version of that to capture it.
Yes. But that does not feel real in the context of filmmaking and cinema and movies. That feels stark and boring.
Where has James Cameron done this before?
Literally every other movie, like Terminator, Titanic. How
did he do it in Terminator 2, let's say?
Terminator is a great example because a lot of scenes are shot at night because he had a lower budget. Sci-fi movies require huge budgets to make, which is why they're not typically like young director type movies. And because he had a lower than average budget for a sci-fi movie, he decided, well, to hide a lot of the
puppetry.
Yeah, the puppetry, the more what do you call it? Like cheaper ways of creating certain effects. He would do really neat things, but to hide a lot of it, you have to film at night, basically. So you don't have to build as much sets. You don't have to do you can indicate things in shadow. A lot of that stuff were like on gels. Like there were blue gelled lights, there was red gel lights to highlight like the scariness of the Terminator. And it's fantastical, but that feeling of fear that you have, the feeling of being hunted that you have, feels real because of things like that, because you take artistic licenses like that. If you were to shoot that literally at night in the streets of LA, it would not look the way James Cameron directed those scenes of the Terminator hunting Sarah Connor and John Connor. Like it just truly, it wouldn't look quite right. In Avatar 1, he took realism too literally, and for that reason it didn't make me feel anything. But in this movie, he finally took some creative license with the mocap, and like he lit things in the way of, like, I know he can. He's a very extremely talented filmmaker. I know he made Terminator and Titanic, clearly. He was, like, that felt so much better done in this movie, especially. It just, everything about that felt right about Act 3. They did it at the beginning of the movie with the ship landing on the forest and all the fire kind of destroying everything.
Oh,
and then
crazy looking. He
really did it at the end there, where the fire and the sink is shipping. The ship is sinking. It's very blue. It's very red. There's heightened drama. There's like sparks flying everywhere. It's really neat. It's very, very cool to see. The problems I have with the third act is kind of with the entire setup of the movie itself. Like we said in the non-spoiler review, there's no closure for a lot of the characters. There's closure basically for Loak, and that's about it. Like, Jake seems like he learned nothing, clearly, if he learned the exact same thing as in the first movie. I mean, I guess in the context of this movie, he learns that he needs to confront his enemies and his problems head on instead of run away. So in the context of this movie, it fits. But in the context of the overall story of Avatar, it's really weird. He learns the same lesson 10 years later, I guess. The Kiri is made out to be so important in this movie. She's basically Jesus come to life.
In Navi.
Yeah, but like, there's no closure for her. There's no tease at the very least of like
what she could do and why is she so important.
Yeah, why is she so important? Why does she have these powers that literally no one else have? They just kind of ignore it at the end. I guess Spider kind of has closure with, like, his dad. He basically gets adopted by the Sully family, and he becomes truly one of the Na'vi, even though he's a human boy. But the problem is we don't actually spend much time with Spider. He's not technically a main character. He's kind of off to the... So, like, I don't really care that his character of all characters has closure. Took doesn't really have anything to do with anything. It's the baby of the clan. So, and Neytiri is basically kind of non-existent in this movie, other than, like, you know, doing the Asan for Asan.
Yeah, and you're probably complaining like, oh, well, what do you want then? What we want is sort of like a tight, why, when this story happened to you, how did it change you as a character?
Right.
I mean, like, it's a little unfair to compare, but, like, we kept going to The Incredibles.
Yes.
Bob and wife, Elastigirl, love each other. And, like, all of that ego and affair stuff is out of the way. Dash gets to do the human thing of being in a race, but then, you know, like, once in a while, like, put a little some juice in his steps while he's running. Yeah, cool. Because the struggle there was they didn't let him go to the track meets because he's, like, too powerful.
Yeah.
And then Violet, her arc is like she's a shy girl, and because of this story that happened to The Incredibles, she's a little bit more confident, has a little bit more pep in her step, is okay with asking the boy out for a date. That's kind of what you want for each character.
Yes.
You want, like, this movie to, like, be life-changing for everyone, or else, like, why are we privy to this point in their lives? So what we're unsatisfied by is, like, I mean, truly the person who gets the most arc is the little brother, is Loic, right?
Yeah.
So, and he's like, if you've watched the first movie, you can kind of tell, okay, the older brother is going to die, because if we're comparing it to the first movie, Jake Sully is the little brother. And then it's almost like Jake resents Loic a lot because he sees the most of himself in Loic. And I really like that. That was satisfying to see that character go from, like, black sheep to finally being accepted in his tribe. The most unsatisfying part is, like, our original protagonist is kind of at the same place as he was in the first movie, and all of the other characters that are introduced are kind of just, like, the same.
Yes.
They weren't really, like, they survived as their arc. You know, they survived the hunt.
Yes. So technically speaking, story-wise, this movie actually has very little closure. And I was wondering, like, why is it then? Do I feel like it kind of does, but it kind of doesn't? And I realize it's because it does the classic superhero thing of good guys won at the end. Because there's this big set piece, this big fight between the Colonel and Jake and family, and they come out pretty much alive and well at the end. It feels like, yay, you beat the bad guy. The bad guy has to crawl back into his hole, and you won. But that's not really closure. The closure, if all of that somehow made these characters grow in a way that they needed, their wants were answered, or their needs were answered by the end, which, like, Kiri's still confused about herself. Jake and Neytiri are basically exactly in the same place as the beginning of the movie. They have to either escape or confront their problems. They have learned absolutely nothing. It's just Jake doesn't hate his son now. So I felt a little like, okay, the story for this movie by the end, it's not a huge improvement. It is an improvement, but I'm still left like, this is a very mediocre blockbuster movie.
What's the sell for the next movie? Why are you going to get me into the next movie? Because this is supposedly a big planned franchise, and it's just like, heaven help me. Like Livia from The Sopranos. If the third movie is another goddamn Marines versus Na'vi movie, like, heaven, may the Lord take me if it's another Jake Sully versus Colonel movie. I kept telling you, like, okay, like, for the love of God, do something different. Maybe Kiri goes through a Dark Phoenix thing, and, like, she's actually the main source of conflict, and just anything but Na'vi versus anything but fantastical rainbow bird creatures fighting epic machines.
Yes.
Like, I'm done. Like please, no more of that. I'm done. Like you did it twice.
Yes.
You know, like you did with like Evil Dead. I keep comparing to Evil Dead. Like Sam Raimi fucking made Army of Darkness, and I was like, yes, yes, that's awesome.
I think for us, yes, the VFX are amazing. That last act is amazing, but it was a drag to get through. Overall, the movie was like, there are times when I enjoyed it, yes, and it's hard for me to give this movie a C because I know there's a good movie in there somewhere.
Well, I felt like we were watching the extended director's cut.
Yes.
And I wish there was a very, very concise blockbuster, just tight version of this. Because, like, this does, like, if you really care, this does open up the world and you get to spend a lot of time with the characters. I just feel like I wish my personal choice was to keep that version separate from the version that's a lot more tight. Because I really would have given this, like, an A. Because I know there's an A movie in here somewhere.
Yeah. I feel that there has to be a reason why I am not as impressed by the VFX as I was 10 years ago. There are many reasons for that. I think 10 years ago, it truly was revolutionary. We've never seen anything like that before. It was considered beautiful. What's interesting is revisiting that first movie, it's amazing how dated it looks 10 years later. Whereas if you've ever rewatched Jurassic Park or any of that era of movies where they still used a lot of practical effects, or even modern day movies that use like practical effects rather than CGI, it just looks so much better. And I can still see the video gaminess of this movie. I felt that way about the first movie. It looks very video gamey rewatching it. Some of the models didn't have as much texture as they put on models these days, but still in 2022 somehow the mocap stuff still looks like a video game. They've made huge strides in like Spider interacting with the Na'vi or the scientists interacting with the Na'vi.
Really impressive stuff to believe that those characters are there
together,
and the Na'vi are just as physically there with the humans. That's really, really hard to do. I still get weirded out seeing Robert Downey Jr.'s face plastered on top of that stranger. It feels like a face floating on an Iron Man suit.
Yeah,
it's really hard to mix those two together, but man, it looks so good in this movie, man.
But like the reason why I guess I'm not as enamored by it is like we've been inundated with CGI things since the last Avatar. We've had 10 years of this. So like when I see amazing crazy things, trains blowing up, things that you could never accomplish in real life because it's like whales and alien creatures on ships and machines, and it's just like crazy. It's like Dune level impossible. Like we can achieve the impossible now with movies, and I'm just not impressed. I want intimate good stories with characters I relate to, and those are the movies that impress me. Because how is it harder to do that than it is to like animate hundreds of CGI whale aliens destroy other aliens and machinery? Like, why is it harder to get a good story with good characters that make me feel something than it is to like make crazy CGI set pieces? At this point, I just think we're past that. We're in an era of like we want practical things, we want real things, and I think we're all a little tired of it. And I get the sense that Avatar is not performing well in the box office. We went to see it on Thursday, the day it basically came out, and for only the diehards would probably go on a Thursday. There were like 2 other people in the theater with us. And yes, it's a Thursday. Who's going out to see on a Thursday? But when we went to see Top Gun...
We saw Top Gun on a Thursday, didn't we?
Yeah, I think so. There are a lot of people. There are a lot of people in our little town theater. And I go, I don't know if this movie is going to make its money back. It has China. The Chinese love this franchise.
Chinese love this. I don't think they're looking at our box office for this movie.
No, I don't think they care.
They don't care how much money it makes domestic. So yeah, any last thoughts? For me, I'm not very excited for another Avatar, and this is a very lukewarm recommendation. I definitely recommend it to people who haven't seen Avatar. Like, if you were one of those people, like maybe you're Gen Z or whatever, and if you've never seen Avatar, don't watch the first one and just watch this one. Like, it'll be more updated for your eyeballs, and it has more story for your brain. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I mean, if you are really interested in creature design, set design, VFX, then I guess this is a good movie to study. If you're someone who loves visuals, as just like, for example, Chinese people tend to like movies like this. They like World of Warcraft, whatever it's called. They like
a lot of like Second Life, like not a different reality from our own.
Yes, fantastical movies. They like the Great Wall movie.
Right.
If you like stuff like that, then it'll probably be your cup of tea. But if you're looking for a big fun blockbuster time with good characters and a good story, this is 3 hours of your life. 3 hours of my life that I will never get back. And if I wanted just a good fun time, I would choose something shorter, honestly. It's not, the story is not to be taken seriously, I think. Most of it is not really to be, it's a big blockbuster movie. It is what it is. To me, the
story just does a little better job pulling at my heartstrings, at least a little bit.
Yes.
Whereas I felt nothing. I feel nothing when I watch the first Avatar, man. I did not cry when the Grand Tree dies, man. I didn't care.
So that's our Avatar Way of the Water review. Make sure to like, subscribe, jingle all our bells and buttons.
Let us know what you think about the movie in the comments below.
Yeah, do you think we're being too harsh?
Or do you think we're being measured? I don't know. Let us know.
Let us know. See you next time.
Bye-bye.